973.
I know, is that a lottery number?
No, I think it's somebody from a federal penitentiary. Oh, it's Charlie.
And there's Stephen. Well, hi, everybody. It is 7:01 on Tuesday, February 15th. I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Thank you for being here. There you go. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us, which is good. I don't.
It's not beer, by the way. It's just ginger beer, I promise.
Fair enough. Actually, it was nothing. The way your background works.
All right. It
It
disappears.
was such a big.
I disappear.
That's really
good to
funny.
know. That's good to know.
It's a stealth beer.
That's right.
Well, and welcome to our guests, Chief Hurley and Chief Pauly, and whoever 187973 is. You're more than welcome. And tonight's meeting is our agenda for tonight is primarily to review the operating budgets of the departments that we can get to. There are a couple that we will not get to tonight, and we will do it the next meeting, which will be on the 23rd. I'd hoped that we could not do that meeting, but I think it turns out that we have the opportunity to have Charlie's time and attention for the entire meeting, and we have the opportunity to do a much deeper dive on the current state of town finance, the financial forecast and whatnot, which we don't have time for tonight. So that will be next Wednesday. And I think that'll be an interesting meeting in its own right. So having said that, if you have the agenda, the minutes for January 18th were for our joint meeting with the select board. So they were not produced by us. They were produced by, I guess, Rebecca. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read through them or not. I think they pretty much cover what was discussed. And I would be happy to entertain a motion to accept them, even though I'm not sure we need to.
I'll move that we accept them.
Okay. I admit my ignorance on whether we need to accept them or not, since they were not produced by us. But there you go. A second, please?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. So Kathy? That's an aye. I say aye. Woody?
Aye.
Jan?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Stephen?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 8-0 to accept the minutes. And I believe, well, Jen, you weren't at the meeting, so it'll be 7-0 actually. The second item on our agenda tonight is town finance status. I'd like to amend that just a bit, since we're going to have a whole meeting to talk about that next Wednesday. I think it may be more pertinent to utilize Charlie's valuable time, because he's bouncing back and forth between us and a select board meeting that wasn't originally scheduled for tonight. How much time of your time do we have, Charlie?
Well, I'd like to keep it to like a half hour or so max.
Okay, I'm not sure we even need that much of your time, but let's see how it goes. I had a chance, and I know a number of you all did, to look through the budget book, and I think it's a good news, bad news story from my perspective, in the sense that last year we had no book at all, and that made it really difficult to figure out what it was we were looking at. On the other hand, as we've noted on many occasions, the Finance Committee is under no particular responsibility to review every individual budget. We have to vote on an operating budget or not, as we did not at the last town meeting. But that's the one charge we have, is that town meeting, we're presented with an operating budget. So we've made the decision in the past, and we continue to look at the pieces of that budget and try to understand the entire budget as a result of knowing the pieces. If you've looked at the budget book this year, while it is a light year ahead of what we got last year, there are still some deficiencies in terms of being able to fairly evaluate the operating budget, not the least of which is that the actuals haven't emerged yet because they're still being worked on. Is that correct, Charlie? We don't have actuals for the previous years?
That's correct. We're still working on closing those books.
Right. So it's hard to know, and this is where I'd like to ask this question of you, Charlie, so that we can go forward and make a decision on what it is we're trying to accomplish tonight in looking at the individual budgets. I know some department heads are more diligent about keeping their own books and knowing where they are year to date and knowing where they are relative to what their original projection was. You have gone through the process of working with the department heads to develop this budget. And I think we understand, tell me if I'm wrong, that the goal was to keep it relatively level funded. But level funded, question one would be level funded relative to what? To the projection from last year, or actuals that we are not fully aware of, or just level funded in the sense that you just don't want to increase the actual month to month or projected spend more than would be required by contract negotiations and union negotiations and so on.
So, yeah, thanks, Fred. So what I tried to do with this budget is to say, if the town wanted to provide, receive the same level of service from each town board, committee, and department. So costs have increased with this budget, but the service level that's provided is not totally, there might be a couple of minor exceptions, but is largely the same level of service, same staffing, same program, same activities. So that's what I tried to do to say, what does it cost if you want to get exactly what you're receiving in the current fiscal year?
Okay. So I guess part B of that question, in a sense, is what would your goal be for the finance committee tonight or going forward in terms of reviewing the ops budget? What kind of feedback is going to be useful to you and indirectly through you to the select board, so that I've made a commitment through Ryan to the select board that we will produce some sort of report once we've done this process with our analysis or our recommendations or whatever comes out of this, but with caveats, clearly, because we certain degree we don't know what we don't know. What would your hope be in terms of what you'd like to see from us?
Well, I think ideally, if there are, listen, I put this together working with the department heads, and it was kind of a push because we lack a lot of staff support at town hall still. Now, relative to one of your questions, the larger departments, DPW, fire, police, in particular, COAs, community services, they have good records on prior spending. So, I think part of the salvation for the town of Wellfleet is these department heads were on their own, and they did a pretty good job managing their finances without a lot of support and documentation from town hall. So I think, in that case, you can rely on their numbers fairly well. And when I say fairly well, I think some of the issues that we need to work on with the department heads are some of the revenue balances and warrant article balances, but those are things that'll come along. But I think if there are some areas when you start to go through this budget where you say, hey, there could be some economies, because we're going to, I'll talk about it in a lot of detail next week, but I think you're going to need a big override if you want to maintain, the municipal operational plan as you know it. But if there's some areas that you look at and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Either the department heads and I can work to evaluate those. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity there, but hey, we put this together relatively quickly without a lot of help.
Right. I know there's been some anecdotal talk about trying to trim the capital budget, or at least defer some of the items there. Do you envision changes in the operating budget? I mean, if we were to recommend, well, trim this or trim that, the problem with that from my perspective is that the big ticket items are people, and it's very hard to question if Chief Pauly says he needs a certain number of people and you've negotiated that number, and this is a service level that you believe is required, how then does the FinCom say, well, you don't need those people?
Yeah, I don't, honestly, I mean, I've done this my whole life. You know, Wellfleet isn't a huge municipal operation, and it seems, I don't think there's a lot of opportunities there, to be honest with you, but I don't want to be disrespectful to your process.
Sure.
I will tell you that with the exception of the Wellfleet Employees Association, all of the collective bargaining agreements expire on June 30th, 2022. So that's why I have warrant articles for all of these collective bargaining contracts that I haven't even begun to work on yet. So I am gonna, my next task is to start, and the two chiefs know this, is to start talking about collective bargaining. So there's gonna be increases, I suspect, after I go through that process. And well, I don't want to talk about collective bargaining in public, but I have an obligation to bargain in good faith, and I will. But I'll be working directly with the department heads in that process.
Does anyone have any questions for Charlie before we start to go through the reviews? Jeff?
Could I, oh, I'm sorry.
You want to say something first?
Oh, Fred, and did you want me to go through where we are in the bigger financial project at some point too?
Not so much tonight as,
I would like to have some updates on what's going on. I thought that was second on the agenda.
it is, I tried to amend it so that we could concentrate on the operating budget, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Charlie. If
Oh,
you
I'm
can be
sorry.
brief.
I think I interrupted your process. So
No. If you can be brief, because I'd like to get through as much of the operating budget tonight as possible.
okay, let me, yeah, thanks. So let me just say this. And I'm going to be repetitive. A lot of you have heard this, but I don't know that there's not public there that doesn't know this. We've been operating under some duress. I mean, we've had a vacancy in the town accountant's office from October through the end of January. So Lisa Sauvé has been doing everything. And then our town treasurer resigned on November 30th. Mary McIsaac has stepped in and served as your interim treasurer, as well as trying to still, Mary and Lisa, carve out time to deal with the crisis that we're dealing with. So I just always want to thank Lisa and Mary, because this is Herculean. And now they're doing other jobs at the same time that they're trying to address these issues. So kudos to those two wonderful women. Now, I would say though, tonight, the select board just authorized the hiring a new treasurer. That person will give, in this case, his notice tomorrow and should be on board in 2 weeks. Now, remember, the beauty of Mary McIsaac is she's going to stay on part-time if you want and assist in the transition and training of this new person. On top of that, I've reached out to the town of Brewster because I know a few people there. And the town treasurer from Brewster, Lisa Vitale, has agreed to serve as a mentor to our new treasurer. I also checked with Peter Lombardi, the Brewster town administrator. He's supportive as well. And the reason I picked Brewster is, well, I know a lot of people there, but Brewster uses Vadar as well. So I think we have in place a nice plan. We have a bright young man who's going to step in as treasurer. We're really excited about Cameron Scott, but we also want a backstop to make sure that he can succeed and the town can succeed. So anyway, that's in good shape. And that, if Cameron will get here in a couple of weeks, that'll free up Mary McIsaac to get
So
back. to
Charlie,
the-
how close are we to certifying cash?
That's what I'm gonna get there. So,
Right.
anyway, that's one thing. Now, what will happen now is Lisa and Mary, as they get through the end of February or the middle of March, will close out FY 20 and FY 21. So our goal is end of February, the middle of March, we're gonna have that job done. Will there still be a variance? Most likely. This has been like a ball of yarn.
Right, okay, so you're saying by March 15th, cash should be certified.
No, I didn't say that. I'd say we closed out the books.
You
for
closed out
20
the
and
books.
21.
Okay,
What will happen then is then the auditors can come in, and we hope they'll have the auditors in here sometime in the March, and they can do the audit for FY 21. Okay, now the Department of Revenue has recently told us that they will not entertain certification of free cash until we finish the audit for FY 21. So that would suggest that we really won't get free cash certified until late in this fiscal year. And I'm still hoping sometime in June, May or June, but that's the timeframe. The Department of Revenue, we've had so many journal entry corrections. I've talked to you about this many times. We've found so many errors, omissions, issues, nothing criminal. I want to say that repetitively. Certainly competency issues, training issues. The Department of Revenue is uncomfortable with the books from 20 and 21. They want the audit done. They want the books closed before they'll entertain certifying free cash. So yeah, we'll
Okay.
get it done in this fiscal year, but it's going to be late in the fiscal year.
Will the
Right.
existing auditors, Smith and Powers, have to be brought back in to do that, or is it different auditors?
No, the current Powers and Sullivan
Powers and
are
Sullivan.
on the last year of a 3-year contract. I'll be talking to them again tomorrow, just to try to, now that I know Lisa and Mary's work plan, to try to schedule when they can come in here and do this audit. So anyway, those are all those pieces that are all finally coming together. And then the only thing I'm going to say, just while I have a sec, is we've been interviewing for town accountant. And my goal is to finish, I'm a little optimistic at the moment. That's always, you have to be careful. But my goal is to finish that process by the end of next week. And I hope to be able to make a recommendation for town accountant. And once again, we'll backstop that new person with some services through Lisa Sauvé and the Department of Revenue and the town of Brewster.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, you all right? Stephen, did you get the answer you wanted?
pretty much, yeah. But I
Okay.
just have another question about what percentages are we over here with the operating budget in terms of, is it a 2.5% over, 3%, 5%?
Yeah, I'm
Ballpark.
sorry, I didn't bring that home tonight because Fred had told me he wanted to do that next week, so I didn't bring that
Okay.
document.
All right.
But
well,
I'll
that's
have that
what
all
we,
next week for you.
So I just want to make, I'm not sure if it's a question, a comment. It's both for our committee and for Charlie. Those of us who have had the privilege to work with Charlie and Lisa and Mary, we're so appreciative and grateful for what they've done. But there's a lot of people in town that don't know Charlie and don't know what, Lisa and Mary have done. And with the current state, I'm concerned what will happen if we get to town meeting and we don't get an affirmative on the 2.5 override. Do we need to have a plan B or that's, I can't imagine going there, but I'm really afraid that it's possible.
Fred, could I answer that?
Just please.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I have a meeting scheduled with the department heads tomorrow at 1 p.m. And I'm going to go over the financial forecast and the budget as we know it. But, this is like the thing I always dreaded about being a local government manager. But I do think we have to be ready. If the voters do not approve an override that I believe you need, then we have to have a plan B in place. We have to be able to educate them, say, listen, if you don't want to provide the additional resources to operate these agencies, then this is going to be the impact. We're going to have to, and the reality is when you really look at these budgets, there's nothing there except for bodies, people to solve that problem, in my opinion.
Kathy.
Hey, Jeff, on that select boards meeting that I referenced before we were taping, there was also concern voiced by the select board. And I think part of, and I'm just going to toss this out before we start going through the budgets, because when I look through this budget book, I'm going to tend, and I'm gonna just toss out my principle when I looked at this, and I think this will help us. But I think we have to bring a budget forward that doesn't have any increases. I'm not going to be in favor of voting for any new personnel. I'm not going to be in favor of voting any new processes that we don't need. I'm going to do that need and want scale so that when we do bring it public, we can say, look, this is exactly what you need to just keep the lights on. So I don't think that there's going to be, I mean, for me personally, there's not going to be a lot of celebratory spending in this budget. And if I seem nasty, it's just because we need to make sure where we are before we can find out how to go forward. So I think we need to use a lot of this money to backstop those things that were, monkeyed around with over the last few years and get things back in place and have a real understanding of our revenues versus our expenses. And that's just my 2 cents.
Do we know who 187-973 is, or is just a member of the public hanging out? Is that anybody who wants to participate? I guess not. Anybody else have any other questions for Charlie right now? Okay. Thank you for that. And like I said, we'll do a deeper dive on Wednesday. You've all gotten the financial forecast, the latest copy of it from Charlie through Karen today. Please take a look at it over the next few days, formulate your questions and thoughts, and be prepared for next Wednesday. So normally what we do, and I think we might as well do it as best we can, I know we're missing 1 or 2 people, is go with the larger departments first, and they're represented here, at least police and fire. So typically we start police, fire, and DPW, and then work our way through the other departments. Yeah, Charlie.
And Fred, I'm going to leave stage right if I can.
Yes.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Nice to see everybody. And as I say, I'm totally yours next week.
Good. Thank you. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
And I have one thing to say. When I went home tonight and told my wife I had 2 meetings in Wellfleet tonight, she really was a little shaken. But anyway, thanks.
Not impressed?
No.
We've moved past impressed, huh?
Okay.
Yeah. I believe normally we start police and then fire. So just as an FYI to anyone who's not familiar, the Finance Committee is attempting within the boundaries of the charter to reestablish its role, or reestablish is not the right word, to refine its role relative to a number of other elements of the government, including the department heads. And to that end, we have had our liaisons, almost everyone on the committee has an assignment to contact a department and become as familiar as possible with what their goals and plans are. Back in the fall, it was the capital budget. Now it's the operating budget, and in a month or 2, it'll be the articles in the warrant. The goal there is for the Finance Committee to be a useful, hopefully adjunct to financial planning for every entity, the select board, the TA, and so on. So Jeff Tash is the liaison for the police. And since the chief is here, I'd love for the two of you to kind of make an inline decision right now about how you would like to present your budget. I'm assuming Chief Hurley, your being here means you would like to speak to the budget. So just want you to know you've got a backup sitting next to you on my screen in Jeff. So if feel free to tag team on this one as far as I'm concerned.
No problem. I'm just going to take the selectmen out of my ear for a second. We're trying to do both meetings too. No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Myself and Jeff sat down last week and had a great discussion, just going over the budget, where we're at right now, where, we're moving on to. I know this year we went back to more of a formalized setting where I submitted a fairly lengthy summary on the department goals, where we've been, where we're going. I did hear Kathy's statement about the personnel and, fortunately or unfortunately with the police reform bill, this happened to be the year that, I've kind of hit critical mass needing to come to the finance select board and the community for increased staffing, but completely understand the situation we're in. I just think for due diligence to bring it forward and just bring it up, and see, where it goes from there.
Chief, let me just clarify for you. I said new personnel, but I did say need and want. So I'm not making a moratorium that nobody gets anything. I mean, if our public safety is the primary reason, as far as I'm concerned, that we pay our taxes. So if there's a need and a want that include personnel, I'm certainly in favor of that. So I don't want you to take that the wrong way.
No, it's something we've been struggling with, talking with the fire chief, talking with Charlie, it's hard on a good year to bring forward new personnel. It's going to be even harder this year with just a lot of other things going on. So, completely recognize that. However, I just think I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I just didn't bring it forward and explain the reasons and the need for it. And the long and short is, the reserve summer program is being phased out, and the police reform bill kind of was the final nail in the coffin, if you may say, on that. So, we're going from losing 6 to 8 reserve part-time officers who, to be honest with you, during my 25 plus years working in town, has been a phenomenal program and a very cost-effective program. I mean, you can get the services of 6 to 8 part-time officers for which you pay, 1.5 full-time equivalency. So that's hard to make up, and I completely understand I'm not getting 6 to 8 full-time people to replace them. However, with the needs, the beaches, the issues, the problems, the complexity of law enforcement today, I need to backfill somewhere to have 1 or 2 extra patrol officers to make up the difference here.
Excuse me, Chief Hurley, to just interject, somebody's got some sound coming through. It sounds like they're listening to something. If you could mute yourself, that would be great.
Let me,
Oh, is it the select board meeting?
apparently when you take them out of your ear, they keep talking. Is that better?
That is better.
All right, sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's all right. I would say from the perspective of the finance committee historically, and historically for me is about 6-7 years. Some members here go back considerably longer than that. There's always all of the budgets that come up in terms of personnel, and to Kathy's point, need and want, run through a sieve where you're looking at the quality of life in the town, and not every department is created equal in that discussion, because some, like police and fire, and to a great degree DPW, are essential services that keep the town running, regardless of whether it's a nice town to live in or not. Then there are others like beach, recreation, library, community services, and whatever that are the cherry on top that make Wellfleet a more desirable place to be and theoretically enhance the happy factor. There is a sort of dividing line between evaluating personnel for one and the other in terms of what you call a service. And it's not to be, to diminish the quality or the importance of those other departments, but it is to say that we probably apply a slightly different perspective on extra personnel in one kind of department versus another. And so I think Kathy put it eloquently in saying that, yes, we understand that you need the number of officers you need to do your job, assuming we trust you to do your job. And so far we do. So there you are. Is that your daughter?
Yep, sorry. Yep, that's McKenna. Wave, good night.
Hi, McKenna. Good night.
All right, go see mama. Sorry about that.
Anyway, Jeff, is there anything?
I'll add on that the other thing that is just how good our police department is and how many services that they provide, you know, and policing is becoming much more complicated than, but what we do in terms of dealing with drug issues in town and dealing with mental health issues in town and dealing with our population, which include a lot of elderly. I mean, not to mention, we're one of the first towns on the Cape to get body cameras. We got to, but what I think Chief was talking about is we've been able in the past to basically, you know, for what, 18, 20 bucks an hour, hire 6 to 8 cops in the summertime, and that's going away. So at the same time that we're getting needs and it's more complicated, it's one of the areas I am really concerned about, whether the town's going to, you know, where we're going to be with things. So we'll see how we come onto this. Anyway, I think you guys do a great job.
All right.
I do have a question. Can you turn it down for a second? I do have a question about the police budget. I noticed that a lot of resources are put towards the Cahoon Hollow, particularly in the summertime. And I noticed in your report, Chief Hurley, that it was mentioned about the number of buses. And obviously that's an important area and we need to have resources there. So this isn't really directed at you, but as a general conversation, is there a way that we can get some revenue from those 277 busloads of people?
Yeah, I
It
appreciate
just
it.
might be something to think about.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something we, for the past 4 or 5 years, have been investigating with the select board, with the beach administrator. We have a task force right now reporting to the board probably next month of 4 or 5 options of what to do with Cahoon, but it is a drain on services. We've had legal opinions that we cannot collect money on buses that are coming there. We have recouped some costs with renting the front lot, with bus companies hiring us, understanding the drain that they are putting on public safety. But it's a huge concern, you know, because one of my staff members up there is a summer officer who will be leaving soon due to the reform bill. So, you know, then I'll be looking at having to put full-time staff up there, which we just don't have. So huge concern there. We are looking into it. But there are some options, and some of the options are not pretty, to be completely honest with you.
Well, I would guess that it takes resources away from other areas that are necessary. So you have to put a lot of resources there to deal with those, you know, all of those people. That takes away from other areas in the town that might need it. So if we could figure out a way to capture some revenue, it would help.
No, we are. I mean, this past year, we recouped about, I think, 15 to 18,000 through the bus companies that did help on busy weekends pay to have additional staff up there. Unfortunately, with the configuration of the road, the problem down below in the parking lot, and then the compound, the problem on the beach, it takes about 5 officers to do that job correctly and make it run smoothly, which, to be completely honest, the only weekend I can commit that kind of resource is July 4th, And some of that is from a public safety standpoint, that if we're not down there, I'm worried about what's going to happen down there. The other weekends, we'll get by with 2 or 3 people managing it. So the other issue that's coming up with this police reform is every other police department is in the same position we are in. You could give me all the money in the world, I'm not going to get the bodies coming to Wellfleet to help deal with this. So we're kind of reaching that critical mass in my profession that, you know, you're going to hear communities are having trouble recruiting, retention, and they just don't have the staff going into this, particularly this summer. I mean, I'm going in short 3 full-time members on top of my summer staff, except for 1 gone. So, you know, we'll do the calls for service. I think I heard Fred or some others say some quality of life things and parking and speeding on my road. And, you know, I mean, unfortunately, we'll triage the summer and get through the best we can. So.
But if I can, to piggyback on that, the page that where you've identified your FY23 additional budget request, the $186,000, that is, I assume, in part to what it says explicitly to lessen the impact of losing 6 to 8 reserve officer positions. How quickly will that money bear fruit? I mean, if we approve that, do you see those officers this summer or next summer?
No, and you know, this is another frustrating point in this line of work, and you know, myself and the fire chief it's a constant issue, especially when you have retention issues. So basically, if I have a position open tomorrow, or this money is authorized for a July 1 opening, by the time you are done advertising, recruitment, which has been very tough, training, and then field training, I would be very fortunate to have these 2 officers trained and on the road by the fall of 23. So, you know, the calendar is just constantly against us when it comes to training. We have minimal academies running, but retention is a huge thing. I just filled my 3rd open position a month ago, and that was open from July 1. It's a very, very tough environment out there right now in policing.
One other quick thing just to add was another issue is Chief ordered 2 new cruisers, I think last July, and you don't even have a date when they're going to come. And so the cost to just keep the old vehicles with 160,000 miles on the road, those costs are going up.
So,
Yeah, as I say, the youngest vehicle now has about 70,000 miles on it.
Fred, can I make a comment about that? The vehicles?
Yep.
And Chief Hurley and both Chief Pauley, DPW as well. I think we need to think about, and again, this is going to be once we are stabilized and have a new town administrator in place, I think we need to talk about making a regular replacement schedule that doesn't have to, that is just in the capital budget each year for cruiser replacement. Because or vehicle or equipment placement, we should be on a plan where we anticipate revenues every few years to replace equipment that becomes antiquated through use. And I don't think that should be something that should have to go to a vote every year. So I would like to talk to the new TA about making sure that when the chiefs and the DPW, the departments that have heavy equipment, I'd like to make sure that we don't have to keep going back to voters and explain every year why we need a new cruiser. That should just.
So Kathy, that's a subject that's been coming up lately. I know it's being discussed. If you don't mind, rather than focus on capital stuff tonight, table that until Wednesday and bring it up with, no, I'm just saying, but bring it up with Charlie on Wednesday, because I know it's being discussed, and the notion of a capital improvement fund of some sort is part of his thinking about the financial forecast. So it would be appropriate for this coming Wednesday.
We need that, definitely.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for Chief Hurley? Well, thank you for your time, as always.
No, thank you.
I guess I'm, again, given, the preamble here, I'm not sure that we need to have a formal vote to recommend the budget, but it seems like we sort of should. So I'm going to
You
ask,
definitely have to have a vote on it. You can't just say, we're all chummy.
exactly.
I move the police budget as presented.
I second.
If anyone is opposed, please signal. Otherwise, I will assume everyone says aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
So that's 8-0 to approve.
And Mr.
Thank-
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I know the policy and the way the draft warrant is drafted up that at least at the moment, I haven't been in front of the select board, that the 2 additional positions are going to be a override warrant article. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure if you'll be opining on that warrant article either.
Well, I suspect we will, but
Yes, we'll definitely have to weigh in on it because it has a financial impact on the town.
Okay,
But you'll-
thank you.
I assume that's part of the conversation you'll be having with Charlie tomorrow and ongoing.
Yeah.
As you work through refining the departmental budgets. So,
Again, thank you to the finance committee support and for Jeff and, it's a great public safety departments. We all work phenomenal together and we'll get there. We'll keep working hard at this. So thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank
what do,
you.
Chief.
Thank you.
Next up would be Chief Pauly and Fire Department. And Chief, your liaison is Ira. So same general guidance. Feel free to tag team. Who is 187? I see you're highlighted.
So I thought just the assignment was to go over this and do it in like 5 or 10 minutes.
That's the goal.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so I'm going to go quickly. Chief Pauly, who I was able to touch base with,
Thank you,
I'm
Ira.
sure is going to, pardon me?
Oh, I just want to say thank you.
I'm sure Chief Pauly is going to tell me where I'm mistaken. So the fire department, I'm very satisfied after looking at every line item that they are attempting as much as they possibly can to level service, if not, of course, to level fund. The total for this year is 2,304,274. I must have spent a half hour trying to compare it to the fiscal year 2022. And then Chief Pauly told me that there really was no numbers for 2022. So I wasted a half hour doing that. Thank you very much. You'll notice that there is, due to Chief Pauly's very good notes, $37,000 increase because the guys can no longer stay in other fire departments when they are when they're going out for training. They have to stay in hotel motels, and so that's an extra $37,000. This year's budget also includes 2 new full-time firefighter. Pardon me? Pardon me?
I think that
Somebody
was
say
just
something?
I think that was just random noise.
Okay. You'll see that this year's budget also includes 2 new full-time firefighter paramedic EMTs, which were approved by the June 2000 to last year's annual town meeting. And you'll also notice that the salaries line is increased because of contractual obligations. And so that's way up. But I do feel overall that the fire department is attempting to provide their excellent service at as good a costs as they possibly can. In the good news, the fire department ambulance revenues are projected to go up by $282,000. Chief tells me because people were shy of calling the ambulance during the COVID emergency, and now they are getting rides to Hyannis again. So the revenues are going up. And of course, you all know that when we get to it, Articles 15, 16, and 17 are asking for about $800,000 for to replace a pumper truck, which is no longer serviceable, some money, small amount of money to make our paramedic training, to make our paramedics stay in Wellfleet so that we can reimburse them for training. And the chief is looking for 2 new firefighter paramedics because As you all know, and we've been talking about this for years, the call program just no longer works in today's demographics. Nobody wants to be really a call firefighter anymore. I would, but I'm way too old, so forget about it. So they're really looking to get a full-time staff that can protect Wellfleet full-time. And that is my summation. I wholeheartedly endorse this budget. And Chief Pauly, please tell me what I missed.
I think you covered all the major points, Ira. Thank you. Again, we currently have 4 people on what we call group, 4 people on staff around the clock. We really need to have 5 on each group to be able to run both ambulances the way we should. We're almost there. We're going to ask for 2 more positions at this town meeting on the warrant with an override. And then next year, go for 2 more positions. One, if you heard me say this before, hopefully we'll be able to take one of those positions out of existing funds and existing monies, expenditures, because of the fact that the call force is basically dwindled down to 3 people as of July 1. So when you balance all this out, so the current budget that we're asking for does reflect those 2 new positions that were passed at town meeting in last June. So, you know, that's a good chunk. That's $168,000, just north of that. And then we've just had contractual increases, not only on personnel, but, you know, every single major piece of equipment we have to have maintained or have a service contract, whether it's the stretchers, the defibrillators, oxygen, you name it. And those costs have gone up about 12 to 15% this year. It's like everything else. Call it what you want, but unfortunately, the cost of doing business is increasing. Our gas and diesel budget's going to be projected to be up by about almost $10,000. So that pretty much eats up a lot of the increase that Ira has discussed or mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Chief Pauly? I have one. I was assumed that the issues that you have with on-call personnel are echoed in other or mirrored in other adjacent or nearby fire departments. Is that a reasonable guess that Truro, Eastham, Orleans have seen a decrease in on-call?
Yes, matter of fact, Eastham doesn't have an on-call force anymore. Truro's is about dwindled down to 5 or 6. Provincetown is really dwindling. They're going to be looking at full-time people. I mean, West Barnstable Fire District and Wellfleet and Truro are really the only remaining departments that do both fire and EMS, you know, paramedic ambulance, that have a small number of on-call people. And those numbers are just declining because of demographics and workload and a whole number of issues that it's not exclusive to Wellfleet at all.
Yeah, that kind of answers question 1A, which was, is there any opportunity to share on-call personnel between towns? I guess the answer is no.
No, because there's just a deficit of the numbers, and in both cases, for a major incident, both Eastham and Truro are coming to Wellfleet on an automatic mutual aid basis. So, you know, we're already running so thin, but we're stealing each other's personnel when there's something larger that we need to handle. And I say larger, we're talking a simple motor vehicle crash in Route 6 that I might need 3 ambulances for. That's going to take resources from Eastham and Truro, in addition to Wellfleet. So,
if no one has any other questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend the fire department budget. I'm sorry, you're muted, Jeff. I'm guessing you are making the motion.
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Again, if no one has an objection, is that Bob?
It is.
It's Bob.
Wait a minute. You're
I missed you.
1872223.
Oh, how did you
Yeah,
vote
I
on-
thought that you're coming from a state prison or something.
how did you vote on the fire department, Bob? Was that a yes? I didn't hear you vote.
Yes.
Okay, so we're 9-0 then on the fire department. I mean, on the police department. I'm going to assume, if I don't hear a nay, that we're 9-0 on the fire department as well, to recommend. Thank you, Chief Paul.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Enjoy the selectmen's meeting.
Oh, yeah. Linda, you're up, DPW.
Yes, Jay would have been here, but I said the liaisons were presenting their budgets,
And you're
so he didn't
correct.
need to be. So
That's
he
exactly
did say,
correct.
though, if we have any questions that I couldn't answer, I could call him tomorrow and he would be glad to answer them for us. But his budgets, all of them, are basically level funded. The facilities budget, the only increase is in contract sales. And again, that's wages and the cost of contracts increasing. It is what it is. It's up to 114 from last year. It was 95. So an increase of 9,000. Otherwise, that facilities is level funded. Operations, same thing. Contract sales was 20,000 in fiscal year 22, and it's 24,000 this year, up 4,000. Jay and Charlie added a new line, 50,000 for unforeseen emergencies. The DPW is involved in so many things that we really need to have some fund. Like one year, 4th of July weekend, the town hall bathrooms were out. So we had to quickly get porta potties so the town had bathroom facilities on the 4th of July weekend. I think it was last year, we had a problem with the 10-wheeler frame, which we were able to fix for 30,000 instead of getting a new one for over 300,000. So that's why both Charlie and Jay added the new unforeseen emergencies line. If you see it at the end of the operating budget.
Yeah, 420.
Right. And then highways from 420. There were small equipment in both 420 and 422. They just lumped those together. So it is actually level funded. If you see on 420, 5850 small equipment.
Mhm.
They moved that to small equipment 5850 under highways. So the numbers are the same. They've just changed the line item.
So Linda, I'm
Yes.
assuming when we say level funded, that we're continuing to say level funded in terms of quality of service, the ability to do what was done in FY '22.
Yes.
Do you have a sense, based on Jay's own personal books, the departmental books, of what the overall increase is for the department from FY '22 to '23 total?
No, I don't think I have that. The total, you mean from contract sales and adding the 50,000?
Yeah,
Total increase.
just total budget to total budget. I mean, we're not working at this point with, for the most part, we're not working with actuals from the previous year. And I'm assuming that, I think we are assuming in general that we are assuming good faith on the parts of the department heads to, when they say level funded, to stick within the same guidelines they had last year to provide the service. I was just curious if we,
Right.
if we knew that number.
No, I don't know what, if you add them all up, I don't know what it has increased. But I'll find out for you. I'll call Jay tomorrow.
I don't think that gets in the way. If you're recommending that this budget looks right to you in terms of being responsible and efficient, I think we've applied the same principle to the fire and police
Right.
department as well.
Because it's not on here, but he has all the figures from last year, like we used to have like the actual and the budgeted.
Yes.
He has his figures for that. So that's what he's going off of, making all of these level funded, his numbers.
Okay, not based on projection, but based on what he actually spent. Plus the,
Plus,
whatever,
well, contract
whatever the
sales, he knows
incremental
what
cost
that
is.
is, right,
Yeah. Okay,
right.
So
Can I
so
just-
it basically took last year's budget and added in some increases for contract things, right?
Pretty,
That's what-
yes, pretty much,
So
and then they,
we're just looking for the percentage of increase. What does that represent in terms of
I-
percentage of increase to the budget?
and if you would ask him, you know, you
I will.
can bring it back on, you know, at the next meeting.
If I heard you, what it sounds like is contract services went from 95 to 114 under facilities and went from 20 to 24 under operate. That's like a 20% increase in both of those.
I think a lot of it is wages. Everywhere people are paying more to get employees. I mean, even our own town is now paying seasonal employees, no longer minimum wage, but $17 an hour for seasonal workers. You know, it's quite an increase. Stop and Shop is paying seasonal workers $17 an hour. I mean, you know, minimum wage workers. Yeah. 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 Getting people to work is hard, you know? But anyway, moving on to snow removal. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't lower snow removal, or we cannot get aid from the state if we go over, if we go over. That's always been. So that's exactly the same as last year and the year before. And 424 streetlights is the same. Streetlights is streetlights. And then the transfer station, it's the same thing. There's an increase in contract services. It costs us more to cart the waste. You know, wages again, I think it's all written right there. Yeah. And I guess the landfill monitoring went up 5,000, but that service increase was, we got that number from an engineer. I don't really know what that means. But yeah. That's a figure. It is what it is, you know. So this, yeah. But I will get the total increase on the DPW budget from last year. And I'll report that next week.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Bob.
I got a question on the solar generated at the dump. Where's that going? I thought that was gonna cover all our needs.
I don't know, because I thought we were going over like the operating budget, and the solar panels are not in Jay's operating budget at all.
Well, you know, you cover electricity. That's why I brought it up, and that's generating electricity. So I just was unclear of how those mesh.
Bob, there is a section in the revenue portion, but I don't think I know how that's distributed yet. But yeah, so we don't know where that offset is going, but there is some money, some revenue that we are going to realize from that, from what I looked at in the revenue section, which is like the first, those folded in pages on the budget book. I did see it in there. It's in there.
Okay.
It's town revenue, not DPW revenue, right?
Right.
Kath?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
right.
I stand corrected. I just know that they pay the electricity, so I guess it goes into the general fund and then allocated out of that.
Does anybody have any other questions for Linda? So there were more questions here than for the other two departments. Do you want to reserve our recommendation until the 23rd? Pending Linda's coming back with the answer to the question about the overall increase in the budget, or do you feel confident that we can recommend the DPW budget at this time?
Well, these are increases that we have no control over.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I understand that.
I'm
I
going to move
just-
the budget.
Well, I'm sorry. I just have a little bit of concern about putting $50,000 on the side for just in case things. If that becomes a habit, then all of a sudden we have this slush fund of just in case money. Linda, the emergency situations you referenced, what were the costs? They were like one-time events spread out over 2 years?
No, I think almost every year there is an expense. Jay gave me two, but with him being in charge, with the DPW being in charge of all the buildings, and so many other aspects, that the fire at the transfer station one year, there's a lot of unforeseen, and
Right, but I think there's other ways of getting that money than creating a fund that's just going to sit there. The bills got paid in the past because the town would have to pay them. If there's an emergency situation and we need to find emergency funds, that can be done. This is starting a habit of budgeting just in case funds, meaning this year 50,000 will last the same for next year. I'm not a fan of those things because to me, it looks like the budget's padded.
okay,
But it's
maybe
50,000.
maybe we should talk to Charlie about that too, because that was
Right, that was Charlie's recommendation. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think we should ask him that.
So am I getting the sense that you'd like to reserve our recommendation till next week when we can talk to Charlie and get an answer from Linda?
It doesn't matter to me, but Ira did move it, so.
All right,
it's,
I'll take it back. If the group, I don't really care. It's fine. I'll take it back. It's fine. It made sense. It made sense to me. I don't know what they do in cases of the toilets breaking on the 4th of July.
Right.
I that's beyond my ken. So if you want to ask Charlie what he would do, that's fine with me.
I think I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, we've been hit up in the last 9 months to raid the FinCom contingency fund because of emergency expenses that needed to get paid. So you could argue that our reserve fund is viewed as a slush fund in a sense. It's being used that way anyway. Now, it's been sort of a, all hands on deck kind of deal for the last year. So I think we've maybe loosened the rules just a tad to what we call an emergency, because there wasn't money to pay for anything. So if we didn't take it out of the reserve fund, it wasn't going to get paid for, and some of these things were being identified as urgent. Having said that, a department like the DPW that has so many moving parts, literally and figuratively, could argue for, and apparently has argued for, having some sort of contingency fund based on, I'm guessing, the history of needing it, unprojected or unforecastable events that happen in a town this size and this complexity every year. If this may not be the best way to fund it. To your point, Stephen, I don't know that it is. I don't know that it isn't, but it's probably not unreasonable to say you need a contingency fund for a town that has all of these things going on where something untoward happens all the time.
He's
So-
Right.
Why wouldn't you, for instance, there's other ways that he could have done it. I think he's being actually quite honest in saying, I don't know what is going to hit the fan next summer. I mean, if it was my budget, I would have asked for $25,000 more in the toilet budget. And then when something else happens, I would have just asked for a transfer. But I think he's being quite honest, if not elegant, in his saying, something's going to happen. I don't have enough money on hand to take care of it. So
Right,
fine,
but
let's ask Charlie.
if something does happen, it always gets paid because the town is obligated to pay for things.
Generally,
So-
we do transfers to do that.
But this
Yeah.
fear thing, I mean, if they're unforeseen things, so whatever.
Can I just throw two more cents in? You guys are gonna be loaded by the time the end of this is over. I think, I don't necessarily, I see Stephen's point, I see Fred's point. This might not be the year to do it. We might need to put the money back where we took it from over the last 3 years. And I say that in the last 6 months where we've taken the money from, we might need to get back to a level playing field before we discuss dispersing unearmarked funds to departments. I would, because I think any department can make that argument that something might go wrong. The beaches certainly could, something else certainly could. So I would say I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea with oversight, but I don't think this is the year to do it because we have to get our ducks back in a row before we add any more ducks in.
But if I'm hearing the general sentiment, even among those who are silent, how would you feel if we recommend the budget with the exception that we believe that this contingency fund, which we can call it a contingency fund, not a just in case fund or whatever fund, that we reserve our opinion on that component of the budget, that we recommend that it not be included in the DPW budget unless there's a clear statement of how it's going to get paid for.
I thought
So
we were going to
Fred,
wait till
what
next. I thought we were going to wait till next week so that Linda can come back to us with the Delta and we can vote on this next Wednesday as opposed to now.
That's
And
another.
you could ask them the same question, and sort of just go back to them and sort of share some of our resistance to this $50,000 fund.
The only thing is, regardless of what Linda comes back with in terms of the delta, if the delta is under 2.5%, or if it's in some reasonable range, that doesn't really answer the question of how we feel about the contingency fund. We can still excise the $50,000 and the delta will be that much smaller. So
I'm of the opinion, like when these emergencies have happened in the past, there were ways to pay for it. I'm more inclined to go through that process than, I don't know.
well, to that point, we could recommend this budget contingent on it not being over 2.5%. And with that,
Actually, Fred, the way we would do it is we'd approve the budget less the $50,000 for emergency spending.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I could move that now and we can figure that we can vote and get it done, or we can wait till
Yeah,
next week.
let's do that. I mean, I think there's value in moving ahead because because at the end of the day, we're not making this decision. We're just making recommendations. And it's perfectly fine for us to recommend that this money be allocated differently or allocated on a just-in-time basis.
No, we're not talking about allegation. The motion I'm making is that we'll approve the DPW's budget less the $50,000 earmarked for unforeseen expenses.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I was just elaborating on that if and when the money is needed.
I'll second Stephen's motion.
All right, is anybody opposed to that motion? We're making a motion that we recommend the budget less the $50,000 just in case allocation. Okay.
Okay.
That's a
good way to
9.
do it.
That's a 9-0 less 50K. Thank you.
Thank you. It's the first time in the history of the Finance Committee that we've actually made a recommendation to reduce a budget item.
I'm not sure that's true, but I don't want to argue over it now.
No, please no. I'd like to be respectful of the people who have brought reports besides myself tonight. So Bob, would you like to go, or Jen, would you like to go? I don't have a preference of who goes first. Jen is Beach and Recreation. Bob, you are Water and Wastewater. Is that correct?
Yes. I could go first if you want.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Water. It seems like the extension down in Briar Lane is less money than they thought it would be. That may be neither here nor there at this point. There's nothing in the budget that they're or not asking for anything special this year other than the operating budget, which is what it is. They expect some revenue from hookups from the extension. They expect, although maybe not immediately, Outer Cape Health to be hooked up. He has a feeling that that well won't last too long, but he feels that they'll try to get the most out of it. The one thing that is kind of on hold that is up in the air is a person to kind of oversee the department and take the pressure off the volunteers committee that's operated now to date. I don't think anyone really knows what the job description is. So that's where we left it off a couple of years ago, that no one really knows what to do with the person or vice versa. So, but that's not getting discussed or won't be on the warrant this year anyway. But they are kind of getting burnt out. So that's just kind of on the radar, I guess. So that's the water.
Can I ask you a question about it? It's on the first page of the tab enterprise. Whitewater contract services appear to have decreased by about $50,000. Is that right?
Contingency below it kind of picks up that Whitewater contingency subcontractors.
Yeah, it's that. How are we to understand, I guess, or is it just spread out over more line items now?
We did talk about Whitewater. He thought it was going to be the same amount of money required of it. Now, it could be jostled around in the budget, but
Okay.
basically it's pretty much the same.
It looks like they just spread it out into different line items.
Yeah, I think that was to make it cleaner or whatever.
Okay. The other question is on the next page. Revenues look like they've gone up dramatically from water usage. Is that true as well? Do we know? From 38,390 to 95?
There were some more hookups. So I don't know if that's
I collected the money, Fred. I went after all the delinquent money.
is that what it was? We didn't get into
Yeah.
that deep.
So we can thank you, Karen. Is that right?
Yes,
Well,
yes.
Thank you, Karen.
Good job, Karen.
You're so welcome. I'm still collecting.
But
So these should have been in the last fiscal year, but they are now coming forward now from your due diligence.
Yeah, a lot of it is people who didn't pay their liens, and that goes back many, many years. So I've gone after the people who haven't paid the liens. I've gone after the people who haven't been paying their usage, their water usage bills. So that's what I've been trying to clean up for the department.
Oh, nice job.
let me ask both of you then, do you have a sense of, every year we've seen the deficit, or at least what we have to pay back to the water enterprise system go up? Is it not going up this coming year? Is it flat, going down? Do we have a sense of what the actual warrant article is going to ask for?
It's gonna go up. And what we're working on now is we hired a rate study consultant to help us to kind of level that out. We're looking at, raising the rates of the water, raising the rates of the service fees, hookup fees. So we're in the process of that. We've been working on that for a couple of months now. So we should, I'm thinking probably end of March, we should have all new numbers for hookup, service, water rates, those kinds of things.
Okay. Bob, do you feel that this budget is such that we can reliably recommend it, or do you think it's a wait and see until the new numbers come in?
No, I think we could probably go forward with this.
I don't think there's anything you can really do with this. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of room
We
to
can't
trim. It is
change
what
it. It is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. We can't change it. What we're doing is just trying to stop the hemorrhaging for the future is basically what we're doing. And that's
And
about it.
That'll play out over the next few months or the next year, I suppose. If there's no other questions, if anyone wants to make a motion to recommend the water enterprise budget, or we can not.
I'll move it.
Second,
If anyone's opposed, please say so. Otherwise, okay, 9-0 to recommend.
But I do have a question. How much money is it going to be saving by taking the billing back? Sorry, I should ask this. Under postage, right now, the billing is done by Penachuk, which a
Yeah.
lot of municipalities use. So I notice here that that's being changed back to billing internally. So is that going to save us money?
I don't think so. It's just gonna cause us to have less aggravation. They're very difficult to work with. And I'm not even sure that they are gonna even get to that. Charlie's running out of time, and I think they're gonna keep going with Petachuk for another year. And they're looking at rolling that into the DPW. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't think it's gonna save us really anything. It'll probably cost us more to bring it in-house, but at least we'll have control over all the information.
Okay, so then this figure shouldn't be in here then. So this budget's incorrect. The one that, I know it's only a small amount, 1,550, but just point it out.
Well, we can make a note when we make our recommendation that we don't trust that number.
Penachuk taking a percentage of the fees? Is that how they're getting paid?
They get a flat fee for like under 300 or 400. Probably, I think it's like I think the cutoff is like 300 people for the mailing, and they do that twice a year. And then I do all the delinquents and all the follow-ups and all the problems. So basically, they just do 2 mailings, and it's under 300 people twice a year.
So the 1,550 is for us doing the mailing. So basically, we don't know if it's saving money because we don't have the offset on that fee that we were paying them.
That's right.
Right.
But I'm sure that'd be taken out if we don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to admit that I am ignorant on this next point. Does wastewater actually have a budget that we have to review? I don't believe so.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
No, we just discussed the latest of the what is it, 504 plan, or the plans that DEP would be accepting. And basically to avoid a 200 million plus central sewage system to replace that with the Shell program, with the something that was approved at last town meeting of putting in 10-foot driving 10-foot pipes around Duck Creek down by the Masonic Lodge parking lot, filled it with vegetable oil, and that's supposed to mitigate the nitrates. It's worked in other towns. It works immediately versus a sewer system takes 15 to 20 years to actually show results because most of the nitrogen is already in the system that the new sewer system is not going to capture. So the feeling is that the sewer system would be kind of a waste of money. And one shocking statistic is that the nitrogen is 5% generated by humans. The 95% is natural. So $200 million would be ill-advised to, try to capture 5% of the problem. The numbers go up and starting in February, and it coincides with the whales that come into the bay. I go, are you kidding me? They crap that much? He says, no, it's just indicative of all the other things that come in, seals and the whales and all the fish. And so all these things are natural. And that number goes up from February to like August, and then it starts going back down the other way till about November, December, January, and then it ticks back up. So, an eye opener for me discussing this with Kurt, and that his feeling is that, and they are going to present this plan to us and the selectmen, that they will present to DEP, and it's the most cost-effective, most efficient way forward that we could get DEP off our backs, quote unquote. So this pilot program, I think, is going to take place this year with these cylinders filled with vegetable oil, which, I'm shocked. It's all news to me. And so he said eventually they would like to have a program from the mobile station all the way to Keller's Corner with these things. And that would reduce the nitrogen immediately. The other thing is alternative septic systems, which are very effective, proven. They're on a experimental, quote unquote, contingency type of thing. They're not accepted dogma in DEP yet, but all the information thus far looks good, supporting them as a good alternative and as a nitrogen mitigating process. So yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I want to get back to the operating budget.
Do they have one? No.
No, they don't.
Okay, so you're bored with my
No,
speech?
not at all, but it's not on the agenda for tonight.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all I have from, you caught me at the end of my speech anyway, so.
Thank you.
All right.
We have, I believe, 6 other departments to cover. A couple of them are very small and should be quick. Jen, you've got recreation and beach. Would you go
Yeah,
forward?
I can definitely comment on both of these kind of at the same time, just for expediency. So in my conversations with both Becky and Suzanne regarding their budgets, regarding their capital budgets, they are really presenting a level funded budget. Their biggest issues are the same issues that some of the other departments are experiencing, and that is an increase in personnel costs. For both recreation and beach, they use a lot of summer workers. Every year, the minimum wage goes up 75 cents. So that alone is almost a 6% increase in wages. But in addition to that, what they're experiencing is that they're having trouble finding help at the minimum wage, which is currently this year $14.25. So that's really where all of their increases are. The recreation budget increased by 7%. That's really a reflection of personnel costs. And I would, although I don't have the number for how much the beach budget increased, I would guess it's the same. They do have added a line item for the Cahoon Hollow costs, which we talked a little bit about with Chief Hurley about the, a lot of resources are needed in that area, and that is costing more money. So.
One question I had, I believe in the budget book, there is not, well, the narratives for beach and community services are very terse. That doesn't affect our ability to make a recommendation on the budgets, but if you wouldn't mind going back to Suzanne and just asking her to expand on her programs a little bit so that we have a little bit more narrative for the book itself.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Jen about either of these programs, which tend to be fairly revenue heavy as well, or at least revenue generating?
I got one.
Go ahead.
Looks like we're going to lose more beach at LeCounts. And I can anticipate not too far down the road that you're going to maybe have to think about how to accommodate all those people that paid a lot of money to park. Now, that could be an expansion of the Whitecrest Beach with a shuttle bus to Newcomb's and LeCounts. But if you decrease the services, there may be a decrease in the revenue. So just something to look at. And also the bathroom is going to be either needed to be replaced at LeCounts, or I don't see how that septic system is going to last much longer with it's going to be on the beach in a year or two. So just saying.
Well, we could fill it with vegetable oil, maybe.
Yeah. I like it.
I think Bob raises an interesting question about the dynamic between the operating costs of the beach, which I assume are relatively constant or increasing, and potential for diminishing revenue. Do you have a sense from, well, I guess Suzanne particularly, if that's something that she's addressed or has thought about?
That's actually not something that we've talked about, but I think it's a good question to ask if that's something that that they're looking at or considering. But it's definitely a conversation to be had.
Seizing land by eminent domain where they took down all of those trees. That's how we get more parking there.
Well, that's what they were trying to do anyway.
So last year we were pretty much foursquare about supporting particularly the recreation budget on the basis of the fact that Becky was doing some really stellar stuff on basically no budget. She was creating all kinds of programs that cost little or nothing. I'm assuming that's still the case.
I think that's definitely the case. And I think it's also important to point out that she's utilizing the school. There's been a lot of talk over the years about a community center. And, now they're calling it kind of a community center without walls, but a lot of the programs that she's running out of the school, which is basically utilizing a resource that we already have at little cost to the taxpayer. And I think that's significant. I think it's a good idea to use a resource that doesn't get used, at certain times of the year and in the evenings. So I think she's capitalized on that. She's done a lot of virtual programs at little to no cost. I think, COVID was difficult for everyone, but I feel like the rec department has kind of gone above and beyond to try to continue to provide programming in really difficult times.
Yeah, this kind of falls into that category or set of categories that we talked about earlier, which is these are programs that are very COVID dependent, unlike, say, the fire department in the sense, well, fire department, I mean, ambulance runs, but those departments exist to some degree independent of whether tourists come and go
Right.
the way Rec and Beach do. I'm guessing we're going to see more revenue this year than we did last year because people are taking their masks off and throwing caution to the wind. But
Well, one of the things I did talk about with Becky was about the idea of finding some other revenue sources. Like they have that new, you know, the new thing at Mayo Beach, you know, that I don't know what you want to call it, but and there's opportunities there. Like they've had requests to rent the space for weddings, and so I think there might be some opportunities for the ability to generate revenue. And one of the reasons in her capital budget she was asking for money, and you know, I don't think we voted in favor of it, but she was asking for money to repair, you know, what was down at the pier to build something more sound, more wooden. Was the thought about that was this kind of the same thing, that it was an opportunity to maybe create some revenue from that as well by, you know, renting it out for events or things like that. So they are, you know, they are trying to look at other ways to bring revenue into the rec department. And I'm all about bringing in more revenue. So
Expect to hear more on parking again.
So can I ask a question on the recreation budget?
Yes.
I'm assuming 482 employees is a typo, that it's only 48 temporary and seasonal employees. But we're looking at recommending a 7% increase, and I don't have, what I liked in the other budgets is that each department had actually put their last year's budgets, even though we didn't necessarily have anything. How much, I think I'd like a comparison, because over the last 2 years, a lot of these things that we did, we were not able to do because of COVID restrictions and things like that. So is there a number that we could get in savings from the past 2 years' budgets that would come from the department head? I think I just like a summary on this one for year over year. And a 7% budget increase, if that's what I'm seeing, is, I just don't, I'm having trouble swallowing that in this time where we need to go bare bones. So that's.
We can definitely probably get the year over year numbers or actual personnel numbers, but you know, you consider it minimum wage increases 75 cents a year. That's a little over 6% per hour, right there. So 7% is not completely out of line. But I can definitely get previous year's numbers from her.
Yeah, I suspect, based on what we've been hearing, and I'm not saying that this negates what you're saying, Kathy, but the narrative from a lot of these departments that hire seasonal or part-time people is that they're competing with Stop and Shop, and it's very difficult to compete.
And the other thing I would
just
point
to
out
find
is that
people, let alone pay them.
in the case of the rec budget, most of their budget is personnel. There's very little in terms of supplies or materials. So it really is a very.
I'm just preparing you to
Yep.
be prepared for town meeting, because this is going to be savage. I just, you know, I'm trying to think like a finance committee member, but I'm also anticipating questions that people are going to be asking when somebody asks, you know, the process and approval. I think this is going to be a tough one.
So is it the sense of the committee that we need a fuller discussion or a fuller justification for these increases, and we can send Jen back and ask that she ask and look at it again on the 23rd? Or do you feel that, I'm asking you, Kathy, I guess, because you raised the point.
I raised the point. I want to see what other people think.
Okay. Where the fiscal.
I was just proud, just because it's very similar to what I haven't spoken yet, but you know, on the Council of Aging and conservation stuff, it's the same story. And it's around staff costs really being the only significant change and hourly work. And I would just say anecdotally I'm on the board of a community nonprofit in the Boston area that does a lot of human service work. And it's really hard right now. I mean, they're struggling. They've had to raise salary above minimum wage for people caring for people with disabilities like my sister, and they still can't hire people. And so I'm somewhat sympathetic to, and have hearing this in a lot of communities, other places too, that just salaries are going up. I think it's a good thing in some ways, but it's expensive.
So if this is a narrative that spans these departments that have to hire part-time or relatively low, seasonal employees, can we as a committee recommend the budgets with the caveat that we have a concern about the increase in hourly wages, but we recognize that that increase is what's the word? Not
Cost of
competition.
doing business. It's a cost
Yeah,
of doing business. I think, Fred, where I'm coming from is when the fire chief and the police chief come in and they talk about personnel, they explain exactly what personnel needs and why they need to do that. We know with Chief Pauly that he has to have X number of people for X number of shifts. So I don't know if I don't understand 48 people and where they are. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I don't understand how that number's arrived at where those people are placed and what the service is. So, I mean, if we're going to really nickel and dime this budget, I think that at least a outline of what the personnel for 48 seasonal employees do and what hours they do and what they cover, I think that I would be happy if I could have a little bit more justification on that. Is that?
Fred, Fred, and I would support what Kathy's talking about, because out of all of the budgets, this is one of them where, right, 48 employees, what happens if you go with less? How does that affect your budget? So I think we need to, I agree with Kathy, we just need a little bit more information on the staff makeup.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest then for beach and rec that we reserve our opinion pending getting an answer to more detail on the multiples here, the number of staff, what they're going to be doing, and the number of hours they'll be working, so we see how the total number gets accrued from the pieces. Is that fair?
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't think we need to take a vote on reserving our recommendation. We're just going to do it. So we have Jeff. I've got the school and the library. I'm happy to end with that. Jeff Behrens, you've got the Council on Aging and Health and Conservation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, again, very similar story. I agree that it would be really helpful to have access to the actuals from last year. And we talked about that. I think some of it is that they're having trouble getting it. So at least my understanding is it's not easy information to get right now, but I agree that would be helpful to have. My understanding is there's not much new stuff, but again, particularly the seasonal and temp work, that's a driver of some increase. And that seemed to be the only meaningful thing that both departments were talking about for what. So Suzanne and Hillary had the same conversations with me about those.
Have they been able to project the number of people they're going to need and what they'll have to pay and that sort of thing, similar to what we were talking about with the beach and rec department?
I mean, I didn't see detailed granularity on all the roles and things, but I saw I saw totals. So they certainly had done something. There's probably a spreadsheet living behind it.
So, and again, without knowing the actuals from last year, it's very hard to evaluate whether. I guess my gut is if we're going to do this with the beach and rec department, we might want to go back to Hillary and to the COA and ask for a similar evaluation, even if it's a guesstimate. I think we need to be clear that we're not asking for hard numbers your best guess based on you're running your department. If you're projecting that it's going to cost this much and you have to spend that much more for personnel per hour or for the season, just provide a spreadsheet that shows what that is. And we can then look at it, and it'd be much easier for us to understand the number. Is that fair?
Sure. All right.
Thank you,
Okay.
Fred.
So I think we'll reserve our opinion on those as well, which brings us to the stretch run here, I think. I'm going to start with the library because it's easy. There's a couple of things that you might have jumped out at you if you looked at the budget. Overall, the budget is flat with the primary exception is that the outreach coordinator position has not been filled for 2 years. Gabrielle Griffiths was the pre-COVID outreach coordinator. The position was not refilled. It's an essential position to the running of the library. If the library is going to be a library, this gets down to the same kinds of issues that we have with the fire department or any other department, in the sense that there are certain roles that need to be fulfilled for the library to function as it should. And basically, Jennifer bit the bullet last year and didn't fill it because nobody was going to the library for a while. As people come back, it's a position that needs to be filled, and it's in the budget. Represents $46,800. It's a full-time position. And the other number that jumps out is, it's on page 72 of 97 in your spreadsheets, but it's not 97 pages, obviously. There's $103,000 designated for materials. But if you look at that, you'll see 0 for books, 0 for non-print, 0 for more books, and so on, going down. What that basically means is that given two things: one, the fact that the library is still dealing with the reality of COVID, and the other, that people are consuming their media differently than they used to, online, through software. They've lumped all of their materials costs into one bucket because it leaves Jennifer working with the flexibility to allocate the monies as needed to the right kind of media. There is a requirement by law, and you'll see it in, I have a narrative here, hold on, which will explain it better than I can. By law, by Massachusetts state law, a library must have appropriated 19.5% of its operating budget for materials to be eligible for state aid. So that's where that comes from. My sense is that Jennifer is doing a good job of operating on a shoestring, has for 2 years, and I'm confident that I can recommend this budget. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to respond.
So are we getting state aid?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay.
And
So
also,
in order to do that, you have to have this percentage on the side. It's basically,
you have to show that you're spending a certain amount of your operating budget on actual library materials.
and it has to be spent. Yep. Okay.
And materials, the notion of what a material is has become fungible. It used to be books. Now it can be a software subscription. It can be a streaming service. It can be all kinds of things that it used to not be.
Mhm.
Are we purchasing things that have ongoing maintenance, like software? Are there additional? So if you lump these together and we're spending software, are there ongoing expenses to what is being purchased?
I'm sure there are some of that is, there's an IT component in the budget.
I've just thrown that out. That's probably rhetorical. I don't need you to go through it. Do you know how much we're getting in state?
Yeah, I mean,
aid?
there's contract clams and contract services, and those to some degree represent some of the the maintenance contracts that support software that's purchased or support streaming services and that kind of thing.
You know what?
So
was
does
that
she
in
actually
today's-
use,
Oh, sorry.
does she actually use all of the money every year? Do we know that? Or,
I don't know that, actually.
so I think Kathy, your question was, what is the expense on the things that we're purchasing with this money, right?
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
one. And then the other one is, do we know what the revenue side is? Do we know how much state aid we're getting? Is it 19 point whatever percent? Well. yeah,
Percent of the
depending-
operating. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. Yep.
Stephen, you know me too well.
Yeah,
Well, I agree with you. It would be an interesting thing to consider, but, you know.
I do know that they returned, well, there's a couple of things. They returned $6,000 to the town for printing by charging that 10%, 10 cents rather, for every day that your book is late, that kind
Oh
of
my
thing.
gosh.
Yeah, no, seriously, this is real accounting for a library. That money actually amounts to something over the
Right.
course of the year and gets returned to the town in exchange for monies that are spent on things like toner, which in toner is going up. They also had to, they had to go to contract services for printing at one point because they couldn't print anymore on their own. So
I'm just
I
wondering,
recommend adopting or recommending their budget. I think it's a reasonable budget. It's not exorbitant. And they've been operating on less for the last 2 years to the deficit of their ability to provide services. What they're trying to do is get back to being a library this year. Like
So they're open, they're open now, right? You can go in every single day or not?
No, you can't go in on Sunday, and they're not open as many hours as they used to be, in part
Right.
because they don't have an outreach coordinator. If you go into the library, there are days where there will only be 1 or 2 people on staff and nobody from the town walking around the library. It's one of those things like the movie theater. If you've gone to the Wellfleet Cinema time in the last year, you may be the only one in the theater. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but one of them is that people don't trust going back into a theater yet.
It was like that before the pandemic.
Yeah. So if nobody has any serious objections, I would entertain a motion to accept the library budget.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. And finally, one of our favorites, the school budgets. There's more good news than usual, I think, this year. I'll run through the elementary school first. Let me get to it here. It actually shrunk. So that let me get to it. The grand total is minus 0.34%.
woohoo.
You're kidding.
I swear, I wanted to delight you, Stephen, particularly.
This is the elementary school, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
And-
she
and-
always does a good job on her budget. Yeah,
She
she's,
does. And
she's great.
let me just say this about the schools in general. It'll become more obvious when we get, I'm going to do tech next because I'm building up to a crescendo here of sorts. The tech high school budget is 1.99%. Total budget increased under 2%.
That's crazy.
That's great.
Yeah. The one that is a little less great,
I'm waiting for the shoe.
Let me guess.
well, except just the Nauset region is up about 5 and something percent. But the primary reason for that is a significant increase in special needs programming, but most of it is getting, the town that's getting hit the worst on that is Orleans. The actual appropriation for Wellfleet has gone down. And not just for special needs, but for our share of the school budget has actually gone down. Let me get the number. Sorry, these are big spreadsheets here. So the appropriation or Wellfleet's share of the Nauset regional budget is minus 8.23%.
Is that
Orleans is
because
up
of lower
9.
enrollment? Is that lower enrollment?
It's lower enrollment, but it's also significantly fewer special needs kids coming from our area.
Okay, good.
It's not just the number of students, I know I've said this,
Yep.
I've said this in, ad nauseum in previous years. The cost of, to the school system of a special needs program student is 10 times what it is for a quote regular student. And you do the multiples. If you go up 5 or 6, suddenly you're looking at $1 million potentially. It's 150,000 per student. So we have fewer students in the region, and as a consequence of that, our percentage of the allocation has gone down almost 10%. Orleans has gone up almost 10%. So overall, this is a good year for Wellfleet in terms of the cost of schooling, in part because of fiscal discipline on the parts of the administrators, and in part just because of the accidents of birth, so to speak. Well, it is what it is. If anybody has questions about it, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the budgets. I have more, but I would, in the interest of expediency, I would strongly recommend that we recommend these budgets, because I don't think we're ever going to see, we're not likely in most years to see something so positive.
So moved.
Okay.
Anybody opposed? Okay. That gets us to the end of the budgets that we can review tonight. I will send a message over to the select board. For the DPW, we're going to recommend the budget less than 50K contingency fund. For the water enterprise, we recommended the budget, but less the Penachuk, is that correct?
1550.
Yes, pending knowing more about it, we're going to suggest that be removed. We're going to ask our various liaisons, that is Jen and Jeff, got a lot of JEs, to kind of go back to the beach, recreation, COA, and health and conservation, and ask for greater detail on the multiples. How many people, how much per hour, how many hours, just best guess projections, so that we understand the numbers a little more granularity. And I will contact Ryan and send him the rest of our recommendations ahead of their meeting on the 22nd, as we promised to do. The only other thing on the agenda, Jeff Behrens put together a sort of proposal. I don't know how to couch it, Jeff, so I'm going to let you.
Sure, just very briefly. I think in talking with Fred, my understanding, I'm new here, of course, and so I don't know many of the folks here, but I think there's a goal to kind of increase or make more robust our role in town of governance and finances. And I had heard, I think people have some interesting and I think helpful backgrounds. And one, I'd love to know who you all are and what those backgrounds are, but also it might be helpful to just collect them, and so we can share them with various actors in the drama that is Wellfleet, our board of selectmen and other folks. So I was thinking of putting together a little mini bio on each of us. I'm happy to do the work on that. If I could just do a 10 or 15-minute phone call or send out a few questions to folks or both. I can collect it and send it back to folks for their approval, but I just thought it might be helpful to have our bios and backgrounds, particularly as they relate to things financial. I suspect it will be a nice, useful thing. So happy to do that if folks are okay with that. If not, happy to not do it, but happy to do it.
The idea is to put together a sort of profile of the finance committee that people can, I think, can look at to get a sense of what our experience and expertise is in various areas, more than like, where did you go to school and who you married to or anything like that.
Right.
Just
Yeah, finance and
what's your financial background.
yeah.
So does that sound like something that people would be willing to participate in?
With respect, that doesn't interest me. I don't have a financial background.
But you have years as a select board member and tons of institutional knowledge about Wellfleet. You wouldn't have to say I was a banker or anything. I've been.
Well,
So Jeff, you're just putting together like a cast of characters, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of a cast of characters and kind of our background and to the extent that
Yeah,
it
I don't-
relates to things
I don't
finance.
think I'd be interested in that. I mean, I don't know what purpose does it, I think it's a nice idea, but what purpose does it serve, really?
So, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
No, please, Kathy, go ahead.
I wouldn't necessarily mind, because you kind of, I'm thinking of it like sort of a yearbook thing, like when people look at the finance committee and say, you know, who are those people and what are they doing? And why?
You want
why-
to sign my yearbook?
Oh, no. I just almost went somewhere bad. But I mean, I get it as far as like explaining to people who we are, who don't know who we are, and why they should, I shouldn't say why they should listen to us, but I guess kind of I get it. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up.
And where would it go? Where would you put it? Like on the website, or drop it in the mail, or what?
I think the website would be a perfectly reasonable place to put it. Just a description of who, you know, get to know us, meet your finance committee, you know, whatever. I mean, if you choose not to participate, you don't have to. There's no compulsion here.
You just get a blank page.
You just get your name and, you know.
Uncooperative.
What I'm going to suggest is let Jeff take a whack at it, and we'll see what comes up. And if people think there's value in it, we can decide what we'll do with it. If we don't think there's value in it that we want to promote, then we won't.
well, I would just like to say, don't take it personally if we decide to opt out. It has nothing to do with you, Jeff. It's just that I just
I don't think you know me well enough to be, yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, I just don't want to, I
mean,
mean, I love when people come up with new ideas, but
Right.
I just, for small town government, it sounds like an advertising pitch, and it just, right now, it just doesn't sit well with me. Although it wouldn't matter if there were like 8 bios and 1 missing. I mean, it doesn't matter if somebody opts in or out, I guess.
That's right. I think that's right. All right, Jeff, take your best shot. See who wants.
I'll shoot an email out to folks who want to chat about it. If you don't, no problem. If you
Okay.
do, etc. Keep it simple.
Next week's meeting is the one that am I the only one that's uncomfortable? We're sitting here, we don't have a clue how much bigger this budget really is from last year, since we don't know what last year's were. We were told by Charlie that we spent more money than we took in, so we have to compensate for that. He said we're not going to be able to get our free cash certified until late in the fiscal year, which suggests after town meeting.
Mhm.
And I have no clue how big this 2.5 override is going to be. It's scaring me.
So,
But
so
what's
to that,
scary is the fact that this town has been mismanaged for the last 2 or 3 years. And now we're asking people to kick in another couple of $1 million to an organization that is, to a ship that's not righted. So
But I
That's
think
the
that's
scary
what
part.
FinCom,
Yeah.
we can figure out a way to help present, because I'm looking at an awful lot of uncertainty.
so to reiterate something that was said earlier, we have Charlie to ourselves on Wednesday. And with a few exceptions, Stephen will come in with his liaison report on shellfish and the marina. But aside from that, we have Charlie to ourselves. So all your questions, plus the fairly detailed financial forecast he just distributed, are fair game on Wednesday. And I would suggest you get your knives out, not for Charlie necessarily, but ask your hard questions. Get it, it's a public meeting, get it out there. And
By the way, Charlie is speaking tomorrow at a forum, a Wellfleet forum at the state of the town. So if you, I'm sure a lot of,
on the theory that we ask different questions than other people do, this is our opportunity to do that. We're dedicating a whole meeting to it, basically, as long as it takes to get the answers you want to get. They may not be great answers. I mean, it's like, well, what can we say? I mean, they may be shitty answers, but they are what they are.
So
Ask them and we'll see what happens.
So to that point, Jeff and Mo and I get to meet with Charlie every month, and it's been opposite the select board meetings. I don't know if you guys are all aware of that, but we have that task force meeting that's still in force, and we meet with Charlie every month, and things are so fluid, and as soon as they take one step forward, they take one back. I haven't reported on it because Charlie's been here at every meeting, and he's by the time we get to a meeting 2 weeks after we meet with him, he's made progress on certain things. I will say, Ira, you are correct that this isn't something that just happened in it's not COVID, it's not the last year. There's been deficit spending that's been covered up by moving money around, and part of our enhanced new finance committee is because I want the revenue side. I mean, that's always been the side missing for me. We can approve 7%, we can approve a zillion %, but we don't know how much money we're taking in. And because we haven't seen that, we've overspent, and we've covered it up with things like raiding the ambulance fund and not replacing this cruiser and kicking the can down the road until the music stopped and there were no chairs left. And that's kind of my theory about, let's not spend anything that we don't need to spend. Let's not put $50,000 in that fund. Let's not earmark anything right now until we get everything back in the cupboard where it was, and then start understanding what our revenues are and what we actually have to spend.
I personally think that the issue is a little bit deeper. And I feel, Kathy, that we have a board of selectmen who does not fundamentally understand the finances of the town in any way. And they're playing a different game. They're playing a game of love me, let's be good to all, let's be good to people. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't feel that we have a competent organization running the ship. And it's been like that for a while. So I think it's a deep issue.
I agree with that. And I think we need to be the backstop to that. It doesn't mean we have to be the selectmen, but we have to understand where the money's coming and going. I mean, we talked about that select board meeting. I watched them, a couple of them where they're spending money. And I did say to Charlie, the select board's approving things, and obviously they're going to the town warrant, they're going to the town meeting, but there's, we're trying to keep a tight rein on the purse, and, there's money going all over the place, and there really isn't a lot of, I agree with you, Ira, and I don't feel like there's a lot of financial competency there, and there should be some.
Well,
there's these ARPA funds too that, and I know we aren't discussing them. I guess the select board is. And trying to figure out that money that's coming in from, I guess it was the infrastructure bill. I don't know. I'm with Kathy too. We don't have a handle on what's coming in. I'm not sure what our role is, but trying to figure some of that out. So I don't know.
Let me just say this about that. We can vent for another hour probably, and we have an opportunity to do that next Wednesday, but the other side of venting, there's a symmetry to this discussion we're having now relative to what we started the evening with, which is that there are essential services that have to be provided to the town that have a kicker every year, right? Whether it's 3% union negotiations or inflation, like we were just talking about with all of the smaller departments, the cost of staffing and so on. Those costs go up at the same time that there's a desire to tighten the belt. to like cut things down, not to the marrow maybe, but to cut things down while we get our footing right. Until we establish that we're back on a firm footing. I'm sure that's what the DOR wants to see. I'm sure that's what the auditors want to see. We are somewhere between those two poles. We were tonight in having these conversations with the various departments. On the one hand, we are justifying extra personnel for this or that because the department needs it in order to provide a service. And on the other hand, we're looking for places to tighten the belt, and they don't always work together. And we have historically had to stand on the sidelines because we do not have a defined charter responsibility to do that. I hope we are finding our voice to be that sort of moderating voice to say, here's a good place to cut, here's a good place to spend, and find that ground. I'm not saying middle ground because it's not always a compromise, but find the ground that makes the town sustainable without busting the budget. And all I'm going to suggest is that we hold this conversation to next Wednesday, because we'll be plenty of time to vent next Wednesday.
We need the TA. We need a professional TA that we can trust but verify. And the verify part has been missing from the finance committee. And I think going forward, that is the big piece for me, that it's trust but verify. But it's three legs of the stool. It's the select board, the finance committee, and the professional. And
correct. So having said that, I think we can hold off on setting our agenda for March and April until we meet with Charlie, because we're going to need more concrete information about when town meeting is for real and when the warrant will be available for real, so that we can set a meeting in March to do our article warrant review. So I'm going to suggest we adjourn for the night. It's already after 9, Ira, and I know how you feel about that. I see Stephen is gone. So
Okay, we
would-
adjourn.
second,
all right, all those in favor? Yay.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you. Good meeting. Thanks, Fred.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief Pauly, and thank you, Chief Hurley.
Good job, Fred.
Thanks. Bye-bye.